So I'm really excited to have everybody over here, like true to our mission over here for our webinars. We always try to explore all aspects of a particular given topic. Cool. So just to kind of talk about this lifestyle thing a little bit more, want to spend maybe our first 15 minutes talking about some lifestyles of what you are doing, and then talk about like what you are investing. So we're going to kind of do a little bit around the room over here, but Jennifer talked about being in Turkey, but she's actually also went on the RV trips, I believe, for a very long time. So Jennifer, what have you been traveling to for the last 1 year?
Yeah, so we've been traveling full time for the last 14 months. So we've been through, I think, 21 states and 9 countries.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been quite the trip. And so and prior to that, we had always done what I call mini retirement trips. And those are anywhere from like 6 to 10 week trips. So we've done Southeast Asia, which is probably our favorite place in the entire world, waiting for things to kind of open up to go back there. We spent a lot of time in Europe. We spent time in Costa Rica, love Puerto Rico. Pretty much like the name of the game for me and my family is basically invest in income producing assets, run a business where we can impact and help other people do the same, take our US dollars and go where we're treated best. And I mean, I gotta say other countries, love Europe, but again, Southeast Asia, Turkey was just a phenomenal experience for us. Love Greece. But there's, I think, a lot of opportunity in these other countries to, again, just live your best life while earning US dollars that are also like tax sheltered, right? With investment real estate. And yeah, Jay. And so that's kind of where we've been. We've also just had a great time just traveling the US too, and have had a lot of experiences because we've traveled via the RV. We've been to places that we wouldn't otherwise have stopped to, or like last Christmas, we were in Florida. We spent some time in Texas. We spent pretty much all of like the early spring in the Southwest, places that would be, like even like Sedona. We spent, I think, about a month in Sedona, places that would be very expensive to like own real estate in and like live in or like rent. But traveling via RV is just a blast. And we've met, I would say, probably more people all across the world in the last 14 months than we have the last 5 years just living in the Seattle area. And so, yeah, that's kind of what we've been up to and what we've been doing.
Yeah, and Jennifer has a small little girl as well. So when she said she's traveling with her husband and her small little girl. So that's kind of fitting everybody in the RV, I can't imagine.
I mean, it's a 45-foot RV, so it's right. Kind of, yeah. You were like, how do you do it? I'm like, well, I mean, it's, like almost 500 square feet. So, which is small. It's still small, but
yeah, that's awesome. And then we do have episodes that we have interviewed a couple of the RV traveling expert in the past. So we're going to put that as a link and sending out to people as well in the past. As part of the COVID series that we had. So there's all tips about like a traveling RV. So, but today's focus is kind of like, how did you kind of make the investment work? Flipping this coin a little bit, Jennifer, is, so what is generating your income right now that is allowing you to do the traveling lifestyle that you have?
Yeah. So obviously we have our investment income. So our strategy is just value add multifamily, and ideally small multifamily. So we just closed on a dinky little duplex today. That's a burr. So we'll, fix it up, refinance it in probably 2 months, pull the money back, and then go do it again. And then we've got some other small multifamily properties that we're doing. And then I also run a business. So as mentioned, for me, I think as an investor, it can be a little bit lonely. And so, once we achieved our financial freedom number and my husband was able to retire at 30 years old, it was kind of like, okay, we can continue to just do this on our own, or we can figure out a way how to help our friends and family do this too, so that we have travel partners. Because the downside is, you achieve financial freedom and then you call your friends and say, hey, do you want to go to Sedona for the weekend? Or like, let's meet up in Costa Rica. And everyone thinks you're crazy. They're like, Jay, I know Katie and Jay, you guys are like, yeah. And I mean, I just kind of got tired of my friends saying, hello, like, we have jobs that we have to go to, or other business owner friends are like, yeah, I could never take 2 weeks, let alone a month or 2 months away from my business. And so, so my husband and I sat down and we're like, okay, like let's figure out a way how we can help others do this so that we have other families to travel with. And so that we have other people that we can kind of like take along on this crazy journey that is life with us. And so, so we do that. So again, we don't do, private placements or like, bigger deals like you do, Elisa, of course. We just help investors just source deals all across the country from investor agents and kind of build their portfolios the same way that we did. So that's on the business side. I think awesome. Today, though, I get more excited about seeing other investors buy properties than I do. Like, I forgot to tell my husband, like, we bought a duplex today. Like, yay. But then,
oh, honey, by the way, we bought a duplex today.
He's like, oh, cool. Yeah, I forgot about that one. And then, I was just texting with an investor before the call and, talking about how they have like 2 fourplexes closing before the end of the year. And to me, like, that's exciting to see other people doing this for themselves so that then again, we can have other, family and friends that we can go travel and like live this big life with. So,
yeah. And then we'll touch base later too, but Jennifer runs a very successful business because I actually traveled with her before.
Outsider, like looking in saying, wow, this is a really successful business. It's all because of my team. 100%.
Cool. Awesome. So Jay, where have you been traveling for the last year, being like a whole world nomad?
Last year, so I've been haven't had a permanent residence for maybe 6 or 7 years now. So I just travel and book Airbnbs or hotels or whatever it may be. And actually that where I used to live is rented on Airbnb. I've mostly been in Latin America for the last year. I learned Spanish finally. So it's been really rewarding to be able to connect with people down there. And I had a friend that I hadn't seen in a while who's out in Paris. So I went and visited there for a while. We took a little trip out to Belgium and then unexpected trip after BPCon to Belize with Ryan from ODC, and then back through Mexico, and then visited the family in Illinois, in the cold cornfields, and back to Phoenix to visit some family. I think we're all kind of back for the holidays, visit family and stuff. But I've been trying to drag my family and friends along on my trips too, with mixed success, as Jennifer said earlier. Some people are like, oh, I got to work too much and this and that. But so mostly Latin America, a little bit of Europe sprinkled in there.
That's awesome. And then where do you see, like, because you probably traveled the most, well, I don't know, between you and Jennifer, but where do you see, like, in Geo Arbitrage world? First of all, can you kind of explain Geo Arbitrage, what that means? And then I think since you've been at it for like 7 years, probably longest us all, where would you kind of suggest people when they first started, and how does that kind of help you with FI?
Yeah, so I think, what I assume you were referring to is Geo Arbitrage. There's a lot of different ways, but basically, I think like Jennifer said, is earning US dollars and spending in a country that's less expensive for what, so either living much nicer at the same price or living at a lesser price for just what you would live in the United States. So I think that is a valuable thing. I think Kathy Fettke has always said too, it's like, live where you want and invest where it makes money. And I think that's so true with Geo Arbitrage, whether you're talking about, living in a cheap, different country and making money in US dollars, or if you're talking about within the United States, maybe living somewhere where it makes sense and you love to live, and invest where it makes sense to invest.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in both of those. I think for people getting started out and choosing where they might want to go, I think it's a mix of cost and what you like, and weather. And that depends on the time of year. I don't know, Jennifer, it sounded like you were taking a trip across. It sounded like you hit all the warm spots, if I wasn't mistaken. Right?
Seattle's very sad.
Yes. Yeah, avoid the cold weather. I love Asia too. I actually think Thailand just stopped the quarantine thing if they haven't reinstituted it for Omicron or whatever. But I love Southeast Asia for like beaches, warm weather. There's also mountains, like Chiang Mai is beautiful in Thailand. And I think in any of these places, you can really spend as much money as you want, as maybe Katie will talk a little bit more about some of the luxury stuff down in Cabo. But you can also spend very little, and especially if you're going to like eat local food. But the quality of the lodging that you get would typically be much, much better for the price relative to something in a nice coastal area.
Can you give us like an example of like a place that you stay in Thailand, the price differences versus like in US?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, it's been since, before COVID that I've been to Thailand because of some of the restrictions. So it was a few years back, although I imagine it's super cheap right now. But we stayed in, me and someone I used to kind of live with, We stayed in Koh Lanta, which is an island off of kind of Phuket. And we had a place that was pretty close to the beach, just like a quick walk across the street or whatever. Nothing like too crazy. It was just like a studio. But that was 500 USD per month furnished, like an Airbnb type rental. I know someone
500
else
is like what you spend on a meal over here, like in
yeah,
San
you very
Francisco.
well could.
Yeah.
And then, like, for example, someone who has a longer term lease out there, a similar kind of setup, almost like one bedroom in Phuket in the Rawai side, not the Party Patong side, is paying 300 USD per month for a long term lease. So those are just some examples. I think for maybe people without a lot of money and they're bootstrapping, maybe quitting their job, and they're afraid of how much savings they have, go launch that business remotely from a cheaper area. You can still live nice, go snorkeling at lunchtime, and make it work with very little money. On the other hand, like yourself, the quality of what you can get there for, let's say 4,000 a month or whatever it may be, is much, much better than you would get in any coastal, city. Like if you were trying to do that in San Diego, you'd probably be paying more than double, if you could find something that has those same characteristics, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'll probably get a penthouse in Seattle, but it's probably only a studio. So that's not a 3-bedroom, 2-level penthouses over here. Yes, absolutely. And so what you've been investing, because when you first started your journey, you were doing Airbnb. Was very interesting in how many Airbnb did you had before you like reach that kind of FI state? Can you kind of help us kind of describe that journey a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I started actually buying some properties. I bought my first was a FHA fourplex in Richmond, California, which is a little bit ghetto. But I got an offer for 3 times what I paid. So that's pretty awesome.
Nice.
Just recently. So I actually started by investing in some of these properties, and I was actually renting somewhere else because I wanted to live somewhere else from where, I was investing, and ended up leasing a bunch of properties. I was probably up to about 25 before COVID. So that were being basically subleased, some I owned, and managed by my team in the Philippines. I think I quit my job when I had maybe 2 properties, I think, and just like 4 or 5 Airbnb units, and then just kind of did what I was talking about. I started traveling, living in cheap places, and kind of bootstrapping the company.
How much was that income, if you don't mind share? I know you're usually very open
to it. Not that much.
But
I think, I don't have the exact number, but I would say probably around $40,000 when I quit my job is what I had between the money I was making off investment properties and Airbnb combined. Possibly a little bit lower, and I was doing almost everything by myself. It's actually kind of interesting. So I was on a flight to Thailand, and my buddy, I was talking about how my original goal was to work remotely, and then I was like, how do I not work remotely? Because I'm tired of doing this shit all the time. And my buddy had recommended a book that I read on the way to Thailand, and that's what inspired me to hire people and really end up outsourcing everything.
What is that book?
It was, I forget the author. It's called How Most Businesses Fail. It's a book about processes and procedures. E-Myth.
E-Myth. Okay. Yes.
E-Myth. It's like how most small businesses fail, something. There's like 50 versions, but I think I read the original one.
Yeah.
So it's really inspiring for me. I think one of the things I wanted to point out about like the, living, working remotely, starting a business remotely, whatever it may be, I think one of the huge benefits besides Geo Arbitrage is it really forces, I think, at least for myself, to really leverage the important parts of a business, which is other people, and not spending my own time on the business, instead just setting strategic direction or hiring someone to do that. Because I think a lot of people, including myself, got caught up with doing things myself because it was accessible in there. And I think that's a huge folly for a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you shifted from the Airbnb, because COVID is kind of probably really scary for Airbnb business when it first hit. And I know Katie's probably can kind of talk about the Kabul boom during COVID. And how the local policy can change a lot of stuff. Now, my understanding,
she got all my business.
So my understanding is most of your Airbnb you had kind of in the Bay Area, and then so like how did you kind of pivot from there?
Yeah, so it was real scary. Airbnb basically violated their own cancellation policy and allowed everyone to cancel. So we lost. I was probably doing about 700,000 or so in revenue a year. And we had, going into the summertime, which is our busiest season, I think we had probably about 200,000 in revenue canceled in that 2-month period. I actually didn't renew the lease for quite a few of the apartments, just so I wouldn't have that ongoing. I was probably paying 35,000 a month or something. And it was just going to be too much if everything continued at that route. No one really knew what was going to go on.
Yeah.
To be honest, mine have picked back up, but not to where they were. And I think a big thing is that I'm mostly in Silicon Valley. And that was a big business thing, like all the tech workers coming in on projects, this and that, everyone's doing it. That is still shut down. And now everyone's going to these vacation or staycation spots,
Right.
Or something nearby, or a quick flight, or whatever it may be. So I think that's been the real benefactor of this flight from the core city, transportation next to jobs and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's why I was joking that Katie took all my business down in Cabo.
Yeah. Yeah, but your business model is you bought some properties too. You were on the Airbnb, and then but you also did arbitraging, which is renting from apartment owners, and then kind of rent it out. You should have used eviction moratorium to advantage, you know.
In what sense?
Because their eviction moratorium, so you can basically say, landlord, I don't have enough money to pay you, therefore I'm just gonna squat over here.
To the ones that I pay. Well, they're all my real estate buddies.
We
so
apartment investors don't like that, but
I just pay what's due. My reputation and paying back is more important than any safety.
Yeah, I know. That was just a joke. But like for folks who is listening over here, is like taking advantage of COVID. Right. So because right now, like your company is probably allowing you to work remotely. So you may want to test out some of your dream locations that you want to do. And then taking a mini vacation, like what Jennifer's talking about over there, workcation, and see if you actually like the lifestyle. For some people, they actually like the comfort of home. So like this feels like it's a temporary thing, because after you travel for prolonged 1 year, it's only for certain type of people. So it's just something that for you to kind of try out, and then you can try out different location as well. So that's really important as well. So JV, you mentioned it before that you have now kind of quickly pivoted from some of the Airbnb diversified into passive investment and syndications and etc. Cool. Awesome. So Katie, I have some questions for you. I'm sure like switch gear a little bit, because Katie is, she actually lives in Cabos, and and then the investor remotely, and then so she's been up in California for a little while now, and then I'm actually looking at some properties that she's showing me over here, all without her intervention. So she's having an active business that she's totally running remotely. So Katie, obviously we're not going to talk about like, can you just kind of give us a little bit market update, vacation destination like Cabos, and then what are the changes that you've seen in the Cabo market? And then I'm going to get into a little bit nuts and bolts question for you in terms of investing in Mexico. I'm sure like everybody has this question. How does it actually work and how the process works?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When COVID hit, I remember it was like, like everything locked down, right? And then I remember seeing people at the store. Cabo was like a ghost town, and people being like, "Oh, this is going to be so bad for us." And I was like, "I don't know. I don't see it that way. I think it's going to be. We're going to be surprised. I mean, people are going to be stuck in their houses, and they're going to be scared to get sick. And then Cabo is so wide open, and everything's outside. I mean, we have perfect weather." And sure enough, like as soon as the plane started flying, it was like everyone flying to Cabo, and people were wanting to rent for the year and wanting to live, because all the jobs went remote. So now it's like you can live and work in your dream location. So we went from having conversations with buyers who are usually retired, or I'm looking for a vacation home to spend 3 or 4 times a year. And like once in a while, like somebody coming to move down to work for like a resort or a private club. And that conversation switched to, I am going to work remotely. And a lot of conversations of, I'm trying to figure out how to get my family to move down here. So I have like this 6 month to a year goal to figure out how to get my business to run remotely. And these are conversations we were never having with buyers before. And then it's really interesting because Cabo has a market that's like, you can buy something for $100,000 there, and you can buy something for $50 million. So you get this big different kinds of people that are all looking for something different, even in the high end, those people are still looking to rent. Usually they just want to cover their expenses. So, the 2 million plus range, like they just want to get their bills paid, which works, So a lot of them will want to rent it all the time. Maybe they don't, because they don't want it to get the wear and tear. And then there's people that are looking for properties that, like, walking distance to the beach, has a pool, has a gym, restaurants nearby. Those places rent a lot more. And now, I mean, Elisa knows, it's like the inventory is it's crazy. We went from being able to, I was putting in offers, I had put some offers 30% under asking, and now it's like somebody's like, oh, I'm gonna go like 10% under, and you're like, well, okay, well, we'll see how that goes. But like, the market's completely changed. There's a ton of pre-construction, and there's just a lot of people moving there. I think there's a lot of, because of the tension in the States, the tension hasn't settled like I thought we would settle at some point, and it hasn't. And it's got people looking a little wider than they used to. Like, maybe I don't have to be in the States. Like, I don't really like it there anymore. So it's like people are starting to consider. We get a lot of lifestyle questions now. People interested in having their kids there. We have private schools. So it's
So can you share some costs, Katie? You were talking about, you have 2 kids and down there. And then you basically had a daycare as a cleaning lady. You were sharing some of these costs with me, like a long term, what that cost is. Yeah.
So a full-time nanny. 5 days a week, 8 to 6, $600 a month. Cleaning lady comes for 8 hours, $35. Property taxes, 0.08% of the purchase price.
1% Seattle, just for reference.
Electricity. It's pretty low. I mean, my property, and if you pay in the first 3 months of the year, they give you a 20% discount.
Oh, nice.
So it's interesting. They're just trying to get people to pay their bills, I guess. But let's see, there's your electricity depends, how much you're using the AC.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have solar, water, and then it just depends on where you live. Some communities have, like, the higher end communities. I mean, they have everything that you could possibly want in those communities, multiple restaurants, private spas, private state-of-the-art gyms. Like, you pay for that, so, right. And then there's other places that don't. So your HOA could vary, anywhere from $100 a month to $5,000 a month.
Yeah.
So it really depends on where you live, but the expenses overall. And then that's also for, like, restaurants. You can eat dollar tacos. Maybe with inflation, we're at like 175 tacos. And then, like, you can also eat like $12 tacos at the Montage. Like, it's like there's a huge gap. Like, you can go fishing for $300. You can go fishing for $10,000. So there's a luxury end to Cabo, and then there's like still the, like, Baja cheap. And that's what's really cool about it, because you can be, like, on the dirt path, like, set your barbecue up on the sand and, a cooler full of drinks, or you can, sit at the Montage and order bottle service and spend thousands of dollars.
Yeah. So what is it like to do a per Mexico? Can you just do a quick walkthrough on the process for someone who's in US, because you are a California native. So, like, for someone from US who wants to buy a condo down there, let's just say, or buy a property down there, like, what is the buying process?
So funny, because a lot of investors that come down, they like to, they try to do everything themselves, which is just so complicated because it doesn't work like the States, like, where everything's online and you can just compare value and all the data's online. Like in Mexico, it's like you got to come to somebody who knows everything and then can give you the ins and outs and the costs. So it's definitely helpful to work with somebody, but the fideicomiso is a bank trust. So they said that for an investment, you couldn't buy a property in Mexico. And then in 73, they were like, well, this is a huge mistake. So in 93, they created the fideicomiso, which is a bank trust. So when you buy property down there, you make your offer, and then we work with the notary. The notary doesn't work like it does in the US. It's government appointed. So they are held legally responsible for everything. And they have to set up a bank trust. So it takes normally 30, 60 days to close. With COVID and like how active the market's been, it's been taking 4 to 6 months. That's frustrating, but yeah, you buy through a trust, and it's 50 years perpetually renewable. You're the beneficiary, so you set up who you're going to will it to. The bank is the trustee, and yeah, so that's only for property in Mexico. It's if you're 30 miles from the coast or 60 miles from the border, then you need a fideicomiso. So besides that, you could buy deeded property in Mexico. So there's, places in mainland Mexico that you don't need a fideicomiso.
Yeah. So what are some of the gut-chews? If I was to buy property down there, what are some gut-chews? Because you kind of talked about the pre-construction as well. So pre-construction, this doesn't happen in US very often because the projects are well-funded. If I build a Class A building, I'm just going to go build a Class A buildings, right? You got investors for that. So I don't need to pre-sell them. But in Mexico, there's this concept of a pre-sale. And actually in a lot of different countries in the world, there's that concept, like in China, et cetera. You can pre-order the properties and they often sold before they ever even finish the work. Like if you don't watch out for it.
Okay. Well, definitely you want somebody who's gonna know something about the developer. Because if they don't finish the project and you prepaid a project, then you're gonna want somebody who's gonna understand the reputation of the developer and if they have money and whether or not they're gonna finish, because a good builder and then you'll see the ones that are like, why haven't they sold out? It's usually because they have a reputation and everybody knows like that they're not going to finish. So, and usually pre-construction, they'll ask you to put 10% down. And then, when they get through a certain amount, then they'll ask for 30 and then 30. And then when the roof comes on, then they'll ask for the last 30. But yeah, there's quite a few projects, especially in the luxury market, that just sold like, it's crazy. They're not even done till 2023. Sold every $3.5 million condo in like,
yeah, definitely. Because it's kind of really weird over here in Cabo. Like, especially there's this like probably famous building in the marina of Cabo San Lucas. If you ever come down here, there's this unfinished building. It's in the middle of the marina, which is prime real estate. And then I heard it's not being finished ever since the 80s. It used to be owned by some gangsters or something. That was the rumor.
Yeah.
But you can see these very well located properties that like pretty much 90% done. Like even windows are installed. They just need to paint the exterior and they will finish the whole project, but it's abandoned. So I was asking Katie the same question, and then that's because some Mexico laws that kind of protects bankruptcies or something. So it's actually better to declare them bankrupt than finish the project and face loss of investments or something like that. So then also a lot of foreign,
do your research. Yeah.
Also a lot of the foreign developers comes in and develop the projects and then just kind of leave. So it becomes headless buildings. It's not like a lot of them, but you can kind of see them. So it's really important to kind of work with people and know the reputation of developer. I mean, after all, as Jennifer kind of talked about before, and Jay also, is like the people. That's very important. Like that's really the core of all the business over here as a concept. That's awesome. Great. Awesome. So like we kind of walked through the buying process over there. I think it's obviously really good. I know Jennifer had a question for Katie before. So we're going to experiment with this. So Jennifer, ask your question to Katie when you're talking about you wanted to invest remotely into Mexico. What that look like?
Oh, yeah. So I've been doing a lot of research on this for a while. Obviously, getting a second passport in another country after experiencing what the US passport restrictions were during COVID is kind of like high on my list of sorting out. So Katie, I'm curious, is there a citizenship by investment program available in Mexico, or what does that look like?
Well, to become a permanent resident in Mexico, all you have to do is really have an address. So people buy and then they apply for temporary residency, and then in 2 years they get permanent residency. And then I believe you have to take a test. after, I think I want to say it's after 4 years, but I could be wrong. I know once you're 60, you don't have to take the test. They just give you citizenship.
What?
So,
I think if you have a child in Mexico too, I think you get a free pass. I think the parents and the grandparents.
Yeah, I got my permanent residency through my first child. Just had, and then I haven't gotten past that. But Cabo was so busy since COVID, I didn't really get a chance to go anywhere. But it's not too complicated to start the process of becoming a resident there and then a citizen.
I believe you probably also researched into buying Italy citizenships or something like that. I've heard like buying a house in the rural area in Italy.
Yeah. We spent about a month this summer in Italy, and there's quite a few like $1 villas, but a lot of red tape. So and they kind of keep you in Italy for a while. So we chose not to go that route.
Yeah.
But
so we have a question over here. Is Kabul safe? Yes, it's very safe. Like I said, I have 2 times a Mexico experience, one in Sayulita. I did not like it over there. But I think a lot of other people enjoyed it over there. I did got food poisoning and etc. But in Kabul's, I stay here pretty much a month at a time. I eat all seafood, raw vegetables, this and that. No issues. Never got one sick with food poisoning. So from a health perspective, it's pretty safe here. And then it's pretty safe in Kabul. I think if it's near border countries in Mexico, border cities, it's a little bit more riskier. I think Tijuana has changed a lot. That's what I heard. But Kabul is really good. It's very safe. I actually went and horse ride it with Nori over here. And then I forgot to bring any cash. And they didn't take a Visa card. So the guy at the horse stable would just said, well, just pay me tomorrow. So that's how kind of trusting and safe like the Kabul populations are over there. So very safe. I never once felt like it was really risky or whatever.
I was kind of like an island because there's one road in and one road out. And when you leave, after you get past, you leave Cabo and next is La Paz, takes you 2.5 hours. And after La Paz, it's like no man's land. It's just mainland Mexico is much different than.
Yeah. And then I've heard someone said that the furthest you're away from the border cities, that the security actually gets better because it's like, where else are you going to go? There's nowhere that you're trafficking drugs to, right? So it's like, you're like your furthest from there.
Come into Cabo are the drugs that get consumed. It's not like it's coming in and out and passing.
Yes. We did have another question over here. As a foreigner, when you invest in a property, can you run short-term rental such as an Airbnb? So I did ask this question, and Katie, you can kind of take away here because there is a lot of condos as well. I think the rules are pretty flexible, but Katie, you can kind of take away on this question. Do you want to answer this? Can you do short-term rentals such as an Airbnb in here?
Yeah, I mean, Airbnb they're working with the government there now, so to tax. So
how much is it tax?
25%, but there are a lot of people that rent their properties privately. So like if you do it all through Airbnb, so there's a guy, I just sold a house next to my house and the guy makes $100,000 a year off of we sold it for, I think he did seller financing and he sold it for 800,000, but he makes $100,000 a year off of it. And I know that a lot of them are repeat clients. So he works or his angles with that. But normally if you're going to do it all through Airbnb, they're going to take the tax right out there. But we can almost always say that you're going to make, if you're going to use the property, then you're going to do short-term rental and bills. But it just depends on where the property is, because if you're close to the water and close to places to live, you can rent it like crazy. But if you're inland.
Jay, do you have some
question?
Yeah.
I was actually curious, Katie, because I was looking around in Mexico a little bit. I had 2 brief questions that I think might be relevant for some listeners also that are interested down there. Number one is like all these condos and all this other stuff. Is it not ejido title or whatever? I know there's like the communal title and there's the other one. Second question, like financing available for foreigners. If so, it was expensive last time I looked. I was just kind of curious. I mean, obviously for those folks paying cash, it's irrelevant. But.
Yeah. So Hito land, that's where you mostly hear all of the stories you hear about my land was confiscated. That's Hito land. It's owned by like agricultural, like communal, like tribal property. And you can legally buy Hito land, but you need to work with like a group of attorneys that specialize in converting Hito land. The Hito land is where you hear all those stories. We don't sell it. You can buy it. But that's where you see these pockets of land where you're like, why is there no property here? It's probably Hito land.
Gotcha. So all your land that you're talking about is fully titled.
Everything that we sell, you can buy, and you can get a trust.
Ownership, not just possession. Okay, and then lending for non-Mexican citizens.
You can go to the bank, and believe it or not, Americans or foreigners get a better rate than Mexicans at a Mexican bank. But it's the
Mexicans are getting high rates.
Yeah, I don't know.
Terrible policy.
They quote it to me, and I'm like, oh, that's a little high. They're like, that's monthly, and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, so the lending isn't super friendly down there. It's like banks will do it like 6 to 10%. Private cross-border lenders will do it like 7 to 12%. You almost always need at least 50% down. Typically, the years are anywhere from 3 to 7. You can find seller financing sometimes. That's how I bought my house. And then there is a 25-year loans, but you're, at 8%. A lot of people use that as like a bridge loan. So they like get the loan and then they refinance something, figure it out, pay the loan off, before your 25 years. So, I mean, I have a cross-border lender that I work with, but yeah, mostly I don't think anybody plans on paying 8% for 25 years.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay,
So,
cool, thanks.
So this is actually thanks Jay for that question. I think this is actually a really important concept that I just want to introduce, not to explode everybody's head. So I think everybody should kind of look into the whole life insurance concept. Right. So like the one thing that I'm kind of so if you create a policy by yourself and you do this infinite banking concept, which by the way, we have content for that as well. It's not a plug. It's just I thought about this just right now. And then so you could potentially arbitrage in your whole life insurance, lending to yourself and then paying for property down there, and then get that into a short-term rental, start making like maybe 10% rental income, starting with the starter home. Jake, I think I'm going to ask you the question about the rules of Airbnb, what's most profitable, but mostly starter homes because your purchase price is lower and then your cash flow is higher. And then you use that cash flow paying back your whole life insurance. That kind of like that whole scheme could potentially work very well. Because I do know a host down here. He's a super host. He has probably over 100 reviews on Airbnb with 3 profiles and etc. And then he even builds his own Airbnb. He lives in his Airbnb building where he has like 10 studio units that he built just for Airbnb. And then he has a 3-bedroom penthouse. It's just a very interesting person. I'm going to try to get him on our podcast. So he said he gets about 12% cash on cash return when he co-hosts and run for his investors for that. And of course he himself, when he builds that and then rent it out, he's Mexican. So when he does that, of course, he's going to be able to achieve a 30% cash on cash return. That's just phenomenal. So that's kind of very interesting. Of course, COVID kind of helped with that as well, but he does complain about this new tax, the 25% tax that comes in and eat into the profit. Just a thought for the viewer to kind of chew on. If I lost you, don't worry about it. What I was thinking about. So Jay, my question over there is, and I'm going to pitch this to Katie too. I don't know, Jennifer, if you have Airbnb or not. What are some of the best Airbnb units, like luxury home renting versus starter homes? What's your thoughts on that?
Pre-COVID, the answer was different than it is today, in my opinion. Like I said, I think a lot of the revenue has shifted from like core metro areas near to businesses to almost the opposite, which is more either rural vacation-y spots, either staycation we're usually relatively close flight to where people live and have money. I assume part of the reason Cabo is doing well is because a lot of these California people, I assume, go down there and it's warmer. You got folks from probably Silicon Valley, LA, San Francisco, maybe some, wealth up in Sacramento coming down. So I think it's changed a lot. The stuff that I've seen doing really well is exactly what kind of Katie's in there doing. But just like I said, the more vacation-y type spots, I think right now. I had this inclination to actually shift my business during COVID and just go to where the money is. But frankly, I was going to make so much money on the sale of these properties, I'm too lazy to do it or redirect my team to do it. So I'm actually just kind of partially winding that down. That business served a great purpose for me and got me passive investing until I sold these properties and got me quitting my job and flying me around the world for a long time. But I'm kind of shifting out of that now. So I think I've seen people do great on the high end. I've seen people do great on very basic like studio units that are really small, including myself. But I think generally speaking, that's just shifted to the more vacation-y or out of the major metro near businesses type environment for now, at least. Gotcha.
We run some Airbnb on top of our apartment as well to optimize our yield on the apartment site. So we noticed that in urban, the studios in one bed kind of does pretty well. The larger layouts, unless if they're like a single family homes, it seems to have less guests, more vacancy. That's kind of just a little bit of the summary that we got over there. And then to Katie's point, I'm guessing if you're close to amenity, if you're in vacation-y area, that's probably a better sell.
Yeah,
better revenue.
Like, Cabo in general is not like it's spread. It's spread out. It's like everything pretty much did good. I have a good friend that only rents luxury. She is the rental like management for a lot of the luxury homes. She made like $20,000 to $25,000 a month renting luxury properties out for people last year. And it doesn't stop. People are renting like blocks of houses like for all their families to come down and live for a month, or we're all going to rent houses on this street for a month. And then I also have friends that own like $200,000 to $500,000 condos, and they're just rented. They can't even stay in them. They're rented all the time. So, but Cabo's not a big city, so it's it's a little
limited inventory.
It's not. So it's anything down there is renting. But the more amenities you have, and the closer you are to a swimmable beach, it does better.
So Jennifer, switch gear for you. The question I have for you is that how do you do BRRRR when you're like not even there?
Yeah, I mean, it's the local team. So, I mean, we had renovations going on while we were in Greece and Italy, and I mean, like all over Europe. And I mean, essentially, my husband just makes friends with our contractors, and they kind of drop what they're doing and prioritize our renovations. And then we use our BRRRR deals to fund our travels. So we do travel hacking. So essentially we sign up for like a new credit card that has, it's kind of like you spend so much within the first 3 months, and then you get bonus points for signing up for that card. And so when we buy a new property, like we just closed on one today. And so like 2 weeks ago, we just signed up, or I signed my husband up for a couple new credit cards, and we put the renovations, like we'll buy like the windows and the HVAC units and like the bigger like ticket items. So we'll meet that minimum spend, and then we'll get maybe 300,000-400,000 bonus points or whatever. And then we'll use that for our business class flights and hotels and, whatever. And then of course we get a big write-off before the end of the year, so that all of the income that we made in 2021 is, again, kind of like tax deferred from this, capital improvements that we put in. But yeah, so we kind of just, my husband runs point on that. And I mean, it maybe takes him a couple hours a week. And he essentially, so like our thing is we pay everyone really quickly. And so like where most investors, they might wait like 30 days or whatever to pay their contractor. We'll say, hey, send us photos. Like let's send our property manager over there to like just verify, obviously, because you want to have like checks and balances because you're not seeing these properties. And so, when they send us photos and when the property manager verifies that all the work is done, we essentially just either wire or ACH them the funds. and they're super happy to get paid. Like a lot of times they get paid every Friday, and they love it, you know, and they're just super happy to get that. But yeah, and then, you know, essentially, so for us, it's a matter of like finding these value add opportunities, which our agents find. They send us the deals, they send us all the numbers, like an estimated ARV, what the rents might be. And then we find a deal and we're like, okay, go ahead and write an offer. And then during the due diligence stage, like a lot of these properties that we're writing offers on, I mean, I've never been to these cities. Some of them I've never been to the state. And they just send us like videos. They said, I mean, I kind of like put it on my agents. I'll say like, pitch me your market. Why should I invest in your market? I've never been to like our deal that's closing, I think like in 9 days. I've never been to Holland, Michigan. I'm like Googling, I'm like, okay, they have like a tulip festival, and like in the wintertime, they do like ice fishing and whatever. So yeah, so I make the agents pitch us the deals. And then a lot of times these agents have property managers, and then we just find a property manager that's going to project manage for us. And so we're like, okay, well, like, here's our strategy is we're going to go in and do, you know, a few minor repairs, increase the rents. And then once that's done, again, we can do a refi event, right? Pull out the initial investment, and everything is just done remotely. So again, a lot of times it's like checks and balances, show us the work's done. And yeah, it's pretty simple. We can pretty much do this from anywhere, which is very different. So like, you know, when we used to invest in Seattle, it was like us doing everything. And I felt like we had to be there physically to check in on everyone and like check on the contractors and like go to do Home Depot runs on the weekend. Like that was like our family like activity for the weekend, was to go to Home Depot and buy supplies. And then eventually it was just kind of like, why are we doing this? Like I think it was almost like we kind of like created a job for ourselves, which is pretty much the opposite of achieving financial freedom. And so there was like a moment where my husband and I were like, why are we doing this again? Like we're trying to save money, and yet it's at the sacrifice of like us living our best life, which is new travel experiences and like going and having fun. And so, yeah, so we kind of just flipped it around and said, okay, like who is our who? Like who do we need to know? And who do we need to have as far as the team in order to make this kind of investing happen? And so if we don't have the local team, if it's like I get the best deal in the world in my inbox tomorrow, but I don't have a local team to like execute on our strategy, then I probably won't buy it. And so the team is everything. So I just realized like if I can kind of like focus my lead generation on talent and just find really incredibly talented people and like figure out how to make it a win for them, which is a win for us, right? So like, again, like our contractors love working with us because they pretty much get paid every Friday. Like they almost like get instantly paid, right? And so that's just a thing with contractors. I just learned that they want to get paid really quickly. Like who knows what they do with the money? I don't know. But if they just like, hey, here's the work's done, and they can show us the photo and the property manager's like, it's done, then yeah. And they, again, they just love working with us versus other investors who are going to like wait for the invoice, 30 days and like mail them a check, whatever. So
that's awesome. That's a systemizing as well. And then we do have an interview with Jennifer in the past. There's actually a 2-part interview, very long interview with Jennifer. So if you are interested in kind of figure out her business systems, you can kind of check out that episode in our podcast. That I will put that in our follow-up email in the recording. How does people contact? So we're kind of wrapping up our interviews over here. There's so much more to explore in this topic. In terms of using basic concept we want to kind of take away is invest where you're going to make money and live where you can live like queens and kings for very, very cheap, or where you want to live. So it doesn't have to be buying the property that you live in. I think that's the whole concept over here. And then with that in mind, all of a sudden it opens up your mind in terms of like, oh, I can't find a deal in my backyard. All of a sudden you're like, there's deals everywhere. So that increases your deal flow as well physically. So think about investment internationally, think about investing out of states, think about traveling out of country and then invest in the States. Last question, did have one more question is to Jay. I'm always curious about this. Tax. You being kind of like a homeless for about 6 to 7 years here, and then likely not in US. So how is the tax being done for that? Just give me a couple sentences on that.
Yeah, I actually just pay my taxes. I'm actually a California resident, but my properties were there too, so I'm going to be taxed in California anyway.
Dear God.
I'm selling a couple $1 million worth of real estate. I'm paying taxes on it. I'm not doing 1031s because I want to be passive. And I'm probably the least tax averse investor out there. Everyone tries to avoid it like the plague. I made a shitload of money and I'm just going to pay it and move on.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I think there's some taxes big, right? So I think that someone did tell me, but check on them. Maybe I can verify with Katie over here. But by buying an asset in foreign countries, sometimes you do not have to disclose to IRS. I believe that was the rule. And then so it doesn't get counted in your asset lists. So for some of doomsday preppers out there, people are thinking about, hey, inflation's keep on going up, the supplies, then there are people seriously considering and worried about the COVID restrictions and all that sort of stuff in the States specifically. So kind of thinking about diversifying asset internationally or the other way. So there is some potential benefits, but there's also potential, double taxation in terms of investments and XOL. So you have to kind of look into these as well, but that's a topic for another episode. Great. Awesome. So how can people contact you guys? Jennifer, how do people get in touch with?
Yeah. You can go to our website, addicted2roi.com.
Awesome. And Jay, how does people find you or not? Like, I guess he doesn't want to be found. I don't know.
I might not respond, but on Instagram, I'm real estate nomad with a period between each one. And J Thomas Martin with the letter J on Facebook. So follow me around. If you shoot me a message, I may eventually respond to it.
Probably you gotta have to wait for half a year. I have a message to Jay and half years later still hasn't responded to me, but he's enjoying his life. So it's awesome.
If you have my WhatsApp, message me there, and if you don't, you're probably not going to get it.
Awesome. So we'll get that link in our show notes over here. We will be uploading our episode to the YouTube as well. And Katie, how does people find you?
I'm on Instagram, Katie Mariscal Cabo, and Facebook, Katie Mariscal, and I have katiemariscal.com. You can find me on the Sotheby's website.
That's awesome. We're going to put all these links in our show notes in the YouTube. Cool. Awesome. So on our New Year's, our next episode, we haven't really decided a topic. I think we're deciding between either exploring Joe Biden's new tax rules next session, getting more serious of this topic, to potentially maybe inviting some of our brokers to come in and talk about how do you actually land deals in a very competitive market. Thank you so much for everybody to tune in over here.